Welcome back to the Leadership Growth Blueprint podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Brian Glibkowski, founder of Raise Your AQ and the creator of Answer Intelligence, a research-based framework that helps leaders influence more effectively by delivering the right answer to the right question at the right time. Now, Brian sits at the intersection of academia and real-world leadership. He's taught executives at institutions like Imperial College London, published award-winning research, and built a global platform used by coaches, consultants, and organizations to elevate communication in high-stakes conversation. Now, this conversation is about how leaders think, respond, and influence under pressure, and why answers, not just questions, shape trust, authority, and outcomes. I'm excited to dive in. Please welcome Dr. Brian Glibkowski. How would you describe the work you do in leadership and executive development for someone hearing about it for the first time?
First of all, thank you for having me, Jordan. Thanks for the wonderful introduction. I appreciate that. So I think if someone is listening to this for the first time, in terms of how I relate to leadership, I think that was your question. Basically, I think what I'm talking about is communication. And I'm talking about questions and answers, which is fundamental to any topic, including leadership. And my specific focus is the idea that, yes, questions are important. And we've heard a lot about questions being important, rightfully so. And I could point to a lot of data points about the importance of questions. Business books on questions outnumber business books with answer in the title 3-1. When you grow up as a kindergartner in grade school, you learn about the 6 WH questions, open and closed questions. What you haven't learned about is a similar type of thoughtful approach towards the answer side of the equation. And my research looks at questions, yes, but also looks at answers and their special role to help you improve as a leader.
I'm really excited to dive into the frameworks, how you uncovered this, what led you to, discover answers opposed to questions. Now, Brian, before we dive into all that fun stuff, I kind of want to go back just a bit in time. Were there any pivotal moments that happened maybe in elementary, high school, early college that led you to study performance psychology?
That's a good question. Really good. I was at a conference one time. I'll skip all the details, but with some of the leading professors around the world, and they were talking about their own research. And I was at a dinner with them. And a common repeating theme was these professors, these great researchers tend to research things they're not good at. And so right away, I sort of reflected back in time, and I'm not good at a lot of things. But one of the things that I always felt I could do better at, have greater impact, was around communication. So I think a lot of your listeners, if they reflect, they're going to say, I have something to say. I have important ideas. I want to share them with others. And you want to share. And if you can't share and you don't connect the way you want to, that's sort of deflating. So I think really my journey went all the way back to, when I was, in grade school and high school and as an early professional, was this idea that I wasn't influencing the way I wanted to. And that became the impetus for the research. I didn't know it at the time, but that I think was the seed that was always there.
When influence is vitally important, when did you realize that answers are more influential than questions?
Yeah, I think while I was doing research, I published academic research on questions. So, I studied that, and that was sort of a natural place to start because that's where everyone's head is. Questions are important, and they are. But I sort of realized that there was this gap on the answer side and understanding that. And as I began to unpack conversations and questions and answers, it became clear to me that questions and answers have different functions. A primary function of a question is that, and this will be very obvious, we ask about things we don't know. So it's like, there's a bucket and we ask about things that are empty in our bucket. So questions are about gaps in knowledge, and they're also about curiosity, all things we don't know. An answer serves a different function. It fills that gap. And when it fills that gap, it creates what I would refer to as influence. It is the answers that create influence. So if you're a sales rep, for those that are listening, if you know how to close a deal with the right procedure, or the right action or the right story, ultimately it's the answers that create influence. That's not to say that questions can't create influence, but we have to look at their primary function. It is the answers that create the influence. And that was the big revelation for me, and really what gets me excited about this framework.
Talk to me about I know you and I talked offline a bit about, I guess, the study and the experiments that were involved in determining that answers are more influential for influence. Can you give me some more insight and, of course, the audience out there, kinda what went into that research project?
Yes. So the original research connected with some colleagues, and we did interview research with the top golf instructors in the world, as rated by Golf Digest and Golf Magazine. And to give you some context in your listeners, there's over 25,000 golf instructors in the U.S. alone. Golf Digest, Golf Magazine, it's the top 100, top 50 list. So just in the U.S. alone, we were interviewing people in the 99th percentile, upper half of the 99th percentile of the profession. And so we wanted to interview them because really two reasons. They were experts, so it's always good to study experts. And they taught, second, a wide range of students. So you'd have someone that was a golf instructor that taught a touring pro you see on TV to like your young son or daughter that was picking up the sticks for the first time. And in research speak, there was no restriction of range. They taught everyone and we started zeroing in on how do they provide answers, and it was a great sample because if we could understand how they did it to all these diverse groups, all of us could use these answers, whether we're talking to experts or novices, people more committed, less committed, etc. And so we studied these top golf instructors and we developed this framework that maybe we'll unpack some more, but 6 answer types ultimately that connect to questions that really made the difference about how they created influence in their world.
That's pretty interesting why you chose golfers. Is there a specific reason why golfers and not basketball coaches or baseball coaches or NASCAR drivers or anything?
Yeah, I think that the biggest 2 things. One, sometimes research is about, just like life is about being opportunistic. So we had an opportunity to interview these top golf instructors as opposed to NASCAR drivers or something like that. So that was one. But it really was just doubling down on the fact that they taught a wide range of students and that the sample was really appropriate for what we were trying to find out.
Makes total sense. Thank you for that. Now, working with, I'd say, institutions, large corporations, is there a specific set of problems that they come to you with that they think they need help on or with? But with your experience, with your expertise, that's really the surface level problem, and the root problem is something entirely different?
Yeah, I would say everybody has their own problems with a capital P. And if I was to ask someone what their problems are, how many people would say communication? Maybe a subset, but you identify with your own problems. In sales, I'm not closing deals. If you're a leader, the change management isn't going well. If you're a mentor, I'm not providing guidance like I want to. Whatever it is, negotiations. So basically, you start with where people are at and they identify what their issues are. And usually people have a good sense of what they are, and it's a good place to start. So if your issue is negotiation, sales, or leadership, then you can add a communication overlay to it. And that's where AQ comes in. And it gives you a framework to navigate these challenges and ultimately be impactful in terms of better communication. So maybe I can give you sort of an example to illustrate. So let's say you're an emerging leader and you were someone that did not have supervisory responsibility, but now you do. You have people reporting to you, and you're a leader in a very full sense of the term, and you want to invest in yourself and become a better leader. Well, in AQ terms, you're going to be navigating all kind of conversations, and you want to identify different answers, but you oftentimes want to start with some very basic questions. And if you could answer these, you're going to set yourself up for success. So, for example, again, imagine you're an emerging leader, and I pose some basic questions, and I'll unpack these very briefly. What is leadership, Jordan? Why are you a leader? How do you lead? These are fundamental questions. If you answer those, you're identifying and locating to your compass about how you want to operate in the world and the beliefs you have. And each of these questions can be mapped to different answer types. So everyone listening here, if you sort of pause this and maybe listen to it twice, because I'll go through it pretty quick, you can do this exercise yourself. So what is leadership? You can answer it with a concept and metaphor. So for example, you could say, as a concept, leadership is inspiring others and holding them accountable. That's a definition. That's an idea. As a metaphor, leadership is 2 ropes. And I have my fingers up for those that might be just listening. When the ropes are separate, they're strong. When they're braided together, as I cross my finger, they're stronger. And maybe each meeting, I want to try to inspire and hold people accountable. So those are examples of what questions and answers for concept and metaphor. In a similar way, and I won't go through the details of the examples here, you can ask yourself, why am I a leader? And you identify a theory, which is cause and effect logic. I lead because X occurs, right? You have to locate that for yourself, or a story. Why do you lead? Let me tell you my leadership story. This is why I lead. And then you can go down to the how question. How do you lead? And you can talk about procedures. What are the steps by which you lead? Think of a meeting. What are the 3 steps to lead a meeting? Or a key action you may use as a leader. And as you go through this exercise and navigate very broad questions, you begin to internalize what leadership is. And then those that are reporting to you are going to see what that is. So that's just one way you can sort of use AQ laid on top of leadership. So hopefully I haven't gone too far afield here, or too many steps too fast, Jordan, but let me pause and turn it back to you.
No, I know I'm gonna have to listen back to it several times. I'm sure the audience will as well, and they definitely should. That was a lot of golden nuggets, a lot of knowledge right there. Thank you. You know, with research, I used to date someone who is acquiring their PhD at a pretty well-known institute, and she told me that it doesn't necessarily matter what you are studying, what you are researching to acquire your PhD, you're always going to have pushback. So the question I want to propose to you, Brian, is where do leaders and organizations resist this idea the most? They're like, no, answers don't really matter that
Yes.
much. Questions are more
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
Well, I think the resistance is actually paradoxical because, you know, the framework is very simple at its core, that there's basic answers. They map to questions. So the resistance is not that it doesn't exist. The resistance is the belief that I'm already doing this, or I already understand this. And that's the issue, the challenge, because people think they do it, when in reality, if I ask a question of someone, how many types of answers are there? Nobody can really say there's 6. They don't even know it exists, but yet they do it. And so what this gets at is this paradox of familiarity. And I think it relates to another way to frame this would be like elite athletes. Basketball is a pretty simple game. You dribble the ball, you shoot it in the hoop. But I come from Chicago. That doesn't make you Michael Jordan. So I think a lot of us think we have skills in communication that we don't have. And so it's about being aware and open, and then you can move forward in a way that maybe elevates you to a level you didn't even realize you could achieve.
How would a leader, thank you for that answer, by the way, how would a leader go from I have surface level knowledge of what Dr. Brian is discussing? How can they move to embodiment? How can they
Yeah.
lead their organization into AQ?
Yeah. I think we're really talking about is habit formation. So you look at the research on habits. You have to have mental models. You have to have consistent, deliberate practice. So going back to the top golf instructors in the world, they were students of their craft. So it starts with trying to understand the world around you. And if you understand the world around you and want to understand it, you navigate that through questions and answers. So these top golf instructors were using AQ without even knowing what it was. Their innate curiosity. So, for example, one of the golf instructors had a library of 3,500 books. You don't have to have a library of 3,500 books, but you have to have curiosity for the world around you, and these people did. So when someone asked them a question, why do I do this? What is this? They had the answers at the ready because they were familiar with the topics. They had thought about it so much, they were ready. And to punctuate this, one of the top golf instructors in the golf, I think it's Golf Magazine Top 50, he taught half the people on the list of the Golf Magazine Top 50. So this is like the Jedi Master, right? And it was clear interviewing him in a non-biasing way that he was just unbelievable at metaphors, just rolling off his tongue in a way that was advancing our conversations. And we asked him, sort of at one point in the conversation, do you always get the metaphor right? And he said, yes. And it wasn't being braggadocious, but he said, if I don't, I have another one at the ready. Think about that for those that are leaders or sales. What is your product? You got the right metaphor. If you don't, you have the next one at the ready. That's the kind of command. So it's really about a matter of will and desire and curiosity and wanting to make connections in the world. I think that'll move you towards.
Thank you for that insight. And part of the reason why I even started this podcast is because I've always been fascinated with psychology and human behavior. And I realized a little later in my career that I don't want to go back to school for 8 to 12 years to study performance psychology. The next best step is to interview amazing rock star guests like Dr. Brian here. Brian, when I was studying psychology briefly in my early days, I learned that metaphors bypass what's called the critical faculty, and it goes directly into the subconscious, and it really moves us. It resonates with us. I'm sure you can explain why metaphors work far better than I can. So for me and for the people listening, why do metaphors work so well in sales conversations, in leadership, etc.?
Yeah, that was well framed and sort of really hitting at the reason metaphors work so well. What metaphors do is they connect to experiences and emotions in a very, very direct way. And when you create a metaphor, it's a corollary to a concept. So if I have the idea of leadership, I can define it, inspiring others, holding them accountable. Then I have the metaphor, two ropes, and we all can visualize two ropes. When they're separate, strong. When they're braided together, we know braids are stronger. And so what they do is they connect to experiences in a visceral way that you don't have to create logical proofs for it. It just you know it, and it also has this emotional connection. So it's sort of charged. A concept isn't necessarily emotional, but when I convey that rope example, it creates a certain kind of emotional laden component. So, for example, to go back to the golf instructors, one of the golf instructors had a very interesting niche of clients. They taught Cy Young award winning pitchers the game of golf. So the top baseball players in the major league, they're pitchers. Pretty cool, right? And he shared with me a metaphorical explanation he conveyed to these top pitchers. He said, the swing in golf is like the throw in baseball. The dynamic balance is the same. And dynamic balance is when you're in golf, it's the point of balance in your body as you rotate the clubs. And so if you tell a Cy Young award winning pitcher, the balance in the swing is the same as the balance in the throw you know so well, do they have to think about it? Instantaneous knowledge transfer. Very powerful, very economical. So that's the power of it. And so you want to use metaphors because it creates experiential and emotional connection in a very compact way. And you can leverage someone else's experiences. And so that's the power of a metaphor.
Thank you so much for those insights. You mentioned AQ. Can you tell us a bit more about the company, about how people can delve into this topic, like how they can train their organization on this?
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. The company, it's Raise Your AQ, Answer Intelligence. The website's raiseyouraq.com. And basically, we work with coaches, consultants, and trainers that want to integrate AQ into their training and coaching and consulting. We also work with enterprises, L&D departments, and beyond. And the basic idea is that AQ is a framework that you can leverage with your clients, but we also have AI-enabled software platform that allows you to enhance your coaching and training.
Thank you. Can you give us a specific example on, I guess, what this would look like in real leadership situations?
So, for example, let's say you're doing a performance review with a direct report, and you're the leader doing this. Company spent a lot of money on this, nonetheless, and a lot of training. Nonetheless, managers are uncomfortable. So, what AQ is going to give you as a manager doing the performance review is a framework to navigate that conversation. You can think through it, the types of questions that may be asked, the types of answers you may provide. And you could share that with the person you're doing the review with and saying, here's how we're going to navigate the conversation. I want to know, you may ask you questions about why. I want to ask you about how. So it gives everyone a common script they can use. But the very skilled person in AQ is going to combine their knowledge. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're a company and you have done disc training. And so you know your disc style and others' disc styles, and you're working with a direct report that's just been passed over for promotion. And they might ask you, they might say, I've been, what do I need to do to get back on track? So we can use that metaphor, tie into experiential connections. And if I'm talking to a direct person, a D disc style, I might say metaphorically, I'm so sorry. You were in a race, you just got in a crash, but you got to get back in that car and slam the gas as hard as you've ever done. Let's get back in the race. That's going to appeal to a D. So metaphorically, doubling down on that, emotionally and experiential, and we know what a crash is. We know what it is to hit the accelerator. If you're a D, that's what you want to do. you want to hit that accelerator and go. Firstly, if I'm talking to someone that's an I, that's very much, people oriented, I may modify the metaphor and say, I'm so sorry you're just in a crash. But guess what? You still have that pit crew around you. They've always supported you. They're going to be there to support you now. Get back in the car. We need you. So I'm appealing to, connections with others. So this is high AQ in a nutshell. It's the command to, navigate conversations and answers that are of the highest quality. And highest quality is going to depend on the context. In this case, if someone's a D profile or not, but there's all kind of variables that come in play. But if you practice AQ and you practice command of conversations, you're going to have more influence. And what's going to happen is the direct report, in a small way, they're going to leave the meeting. What are they going to do? They're going to smile. They're going to have confidence. They're going to say, Brian, he's a great manager. And then in big ways, other things are going to happen. The converse, we all know what the converse looks like. They leave deflated. Brian is a jerk. He's not listening to me, et cetera, and so forth. So the difference is subtle and it can be profound, but it's about putting these elements together that you learn and you practice and then you execute. So that's an example related to performance reviews.
Thank you so much, Brian. You are seriously giving us a lot of gems. With leaders in their so-called leadership position, are there any beliefs that they have to unlearn before they can actually fully adopt AQ?
Yeah, I think there's probably two beliefs that you want to lean into. Say one is the belief that questions are the only thing we need to focus on. So that's something you have to unlearn. And the point is not that you only focus on answers. The metaphorically, what the goal is to have balance. So I like to say, think of a dinner conversation with a friend. If that conversation went well, chances are it's balanced. Both sides speak about equally. Both sides ask and answer questions. Both sides care about each other. So that's what you need to move towards as a leader, is the idea that I want to be involved in balanced conversation. It's not my role just to ask questions. It's not my role just to provide answers. It is the balance. So that's one thing you have to unlearn if you have a polar perspective. You have to move towards balance. And that's the first thing. The second thing is you really have to start to think about your values and what you identify with. So let's say, you reflect on this and say, I'm a servant leader. I believe in win-win negotiating. Well, these are all things that you want to really lean into. It allows you to be authentic. And in AQ terms, these become the context for all your conversations. So as you move forward, in a way, you have to go from checkers to chess, or even three-dimensional chess, but it's easier. That's a wrong metaphor. But so you start off, by doing a negotiation, answering their questions, but can you always be win-win? Everything you say, can you always be win-win? So that's when you're operating at the highest level, is that you have this focus, you're balanced, and then you're ready to engage. If you can sort of do both of those things, you're really going to advance your ability to be an effective communicator.
Two follow-up questions. The first one is going to be, out of the 6 answer types within AQ, which ones do you feel like are the most influential, or does it truly differ on the person that you're communicating with, the topic, the situation that you're in?
Yeah, I think great questions, great setup. The short answer, metaphorically, it's like you have 6 children. You love them all. They're all important. It's sort of like that. They all can be influential, but they can be influential in different ways. And the influence depends on the importance of the questions being asked. So maybe, let's say, if you're in a selling environment, you're convinced why you need a new CRM. You just don't know how to implement it properly. And so it's the questions that are most relevant that you have to focus on. That's one way of discussing it. Second, there are individual differences. So Jordan, you may be someone that loves stories and metaphors. So regardless of the questions, I might sort of move in that direction and over-index in that direction because I'm going to see your reaction. When I tell you that story, you're getting animated, you're excited, and that's what we call different styles. So if you see a visual of AQ, there's different colors. Concept and theory are yellow, analytical. They explain and predict in the complex world. Metaphor and story are relational. They connect to experiences and emotions, red, and practical answers are procedure and action. They're blue, about getting things done. So there's multiple ways you can overlay this for what's best. Where I started was there is no single best answer. It depends on the question, depends on the style of the other parties. It depends on which answers you have at the ready that are best. Maybe you really want to use a metaphor, but you don't have a good metaphor to use. So it's answering the what question, you do a concept instead. So there's all these factors and many more that determine at any given point what's best. But I'll end with this. The most exciting thing I found about AQ is that when you engage in people in conversations and you have a level of proficiency, you don't have to choose a single best answer. As you get in the flow, one or two answers, you perform well in the conversation, you're engaged, people will respond in kind. Then you're in the flow, and then you can have these wonderful conversations. So there you go.
Thank you. Thank you. No, thank you for that insight. The second question I had for you pertains to communication skills and practical tips and pointers, but I kind of want to frame it this way. I believe I read this story in the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. I think I probably butchered that name. The audience, I'm sure you know exactly who that is. He talks about the power of your words. And this is kind of an extreme example, but if we look at, old German times with Hitler, he took a country that was completely impoverished and took them to, uh, I don't know, not being impoverished through his words and how influential our words can be. Now, again, I'm not saying what he did was obviously a good thing. I'm just saying, pointing the example, pointing to the story that words are extremely powerful. Now, Dr. Brian, what would you say to someone that is looking to, I'm sure we all are, but looking to improve their communication skills? Do you have any practical pointers, tips and tricks, anything and all that we can learn?
Yeah, I think it's just sort of point out quality, and then sort of the thing that made me connect to also is the economy of the answers. You have the quality of your answers and the economy. So really, what you want to do is have really great answers, stories, metaphors, procedures, etc. But not only are they great, they're economical, they're compact. And so, in terms of rhetoric, I think the way I thought of this was, rhetoric is about command of language. So if you could say something in 10 words instead of 20, that's better. So this really gets at you refining the quality of your answers. So one thing you could do is, look at the Raise Your AQ website. We have a free test you can take. You read the book, and you're going to learn about the attributes of a high quality answer. So for example, if someone says, how do I do something? As a rule of thumb, you want to give them a 3-step procedure, A, B, and C. Here's the 3 steps. You don't want to ramble. You don't want to say 10 steps, right? But in similar ways, for all the answer types, it's about connecting to the attributes that make that answer best and doing it in the most economical way you can. That's what you want to do. So you want to be mindful. And I'll say to punctuate this, we have different caricatures we talk about sometimes when we think of AQ and people we may know. We may know someone, we call him Ron Rambler, right? You're looking for a short answer. Ron Rambler is giving you the long answer. Well, that's lack of understanding of AQ. Maybe not recognizing the right question and mapping it to the right answer, and then being able to answer that in as effective and concise and appropriate way as possible. So with AQ, you can mitigate those concerns. So let me stop there. I think I give you do these 5 things, but that's just a couple points to consider.
No, for sure. And I definitely took away a couple of things from that. Be more concise, at least just reflected on how I communicate. Be more concise and don't ramble on with your questions, possibly.
Yeah, and I think for those that are listening and those that maybe look at the book and you say, "Oh, Brian, he's doing things inconsistent with what he teaches." They probably am, because remember, going back to what we talked about in the beginning, we tend to do researchers will do research on things they're not good at, and I think it AQ has helped me to slow down my thinking, and in a sense, I'm sort of Ron Rambler, but I need to slow down, I need to be intentional, and that makes a big difference for me. So I don't claim to be the star communicator. I'm just trying, like all of us, to be better.
No, absolutely. No one's definitely perfect. And communication is such a vital point in sales, leadership, your home life, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a bit curious, where did this curiosity come from? Like, I guess how long has this been a curiosity subject or a curious subject for you personally?
Communication, or you're asking in a more broad sense, like,
I would say we can start with communication and then AQ specifically.
oh, okay, yeah. I mean, AQ, well, I'll say communication. I think it was one of these spider senses I had that again, I wasn't being an effective communicator. I couldn't really put my finger on it. And just give you an example. I would teach negotiations to undergraduates, and in terms of organizational behavior, negotiations is a topic by professors that's widely understood to be perhaps the topic we know the most about, the most research, the most practical advice. And I would get in front of the class, I'd say some of these things and say, this is going to help you get a job. And then, if I had 30 students in the class, I'd be surprised if one of them remembered it a week later, yet alone used in a job interview. And this is part of that boiling frustration. Like I wanted to be a conduit for this wonderful advice to help these students, and I was letting them down. And that was sort of the spider sense about the communication. Then going to the answer intelligence, when we're talking to these top golf instructors in the world, at some point it began to come into focus that the issue was I didn't understand the answers I was providing, nor did I understand how they mapped to questions. And we developed this framework, the circular framework, and it allowed someone like myself to navigate the conversations. So then when I got back into the classroom, I would take negotiations. I would design it consistent with AQ. I would think of the questions. What is negotiations? Why do you negotiate? How do we negotiate? And as well as more specific questions. And I would prepare my materials, my lectures to connect to those different answer types. And engagement went up, understanding went up. Because I wasn't talking through people, I was addressing their questions, implicit or explicit, as asked in ways that could digest in a full way.
I guess a follow-up question is, imagine I'm an organization, okay, and I own a corporation, and I want to work with you and you specifically, or at least delve deep into AQ. I guess what is that exact process from onboarding to understanding the material to implementing it? Yeah, I guess how would that look if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different pathways. So, perhaps if you're a coach, trainer, consultant, you get certified and you learn about AQ and you learn about the different things we haven't even talked about, like high AQ practices, these techniques that you use to navigate the circular wheel. You learn about all that. You get trained up so you can share and communicate this to others. And in the process, you also learn about how you would integrate this into different training and coaching programs. So you could, if you wanted to be on the facilitation side, that's what you would do. If you were a leader that wanted to level up, you would have someone like myself or one of my certified partners around the world to come in and to lead you through that. And so, for example, that, I'll give you an example related to sales. So we have sales, several sales partners, and one application could be, you start with the organization to see if they can communicate their value proposition to, and related to basic answers. What is your product? Why do people buy it? How do they buy it? There's different tools, survey-like tools we could develop, and we sort of develop answer sets, common answers we use. And also, we, as an organization, we start to say, hey, there's 3 metaphors we use to describe our product. You start to sort of deepen that understanding. Then you can move on to doing different cases and applications where we have AI-enabled software. So imagine one of our partners in Chicago here, Tom Latteray, works with companies that sell sewer equipment. And imagine if you're selling sewer equipment, you could have different cases related to selling the equipment. You're selling to a mayor. You're selling to someone that's in charge of materials. You're selling different products. And then you can, using AI, you can get into very specific questions and role play those answers, and you just sort of develop your competency. So what I'm getting at is there's a whole learning journey that can be developed from beginning of basic awareness to full integration into cases you need to get better at. So maybe as a sales organization, the sewer company needs to get better at the top of the funnel conversation or bottom. You just sort of weave in AQ into that learning journey and helping them to make it second nature. So I'll stop there. I don't know if I gave a real good window into what that would look like, but that's my description.
No, for sure. I understood that. So in regards to someone working with you and implementing AQ into their corporation, into their business, do you have any specific like case studies or metrics on any improvement that that organization had by using your material and your frameworks?
That's a great question. don't have published case studies. And some of this is proprietary within companies, and that's one of the things on the to-do items we want to focus more on is having uh, actual case studies we can reference to more. That's not to say that they don't exist, but heretofore, done a lot of go-to-market through these third-party coaches, consultants, and trainers. So what they do is they do their stuff, and sometimes they don't always report back to me in a way that I'd like, or maybe would be helpful for everyone's cause. So don't have very direct case studies with numbers, but of course there's a lot of examples that are anecdotal that I can reference. For example, again, sort of doubling down on DISC. I mean, I mentioned this, we have a partnership with one of the largest DISC providers in the world, Assessments 24/7. And we did some research with companies trying to communicate their DISC profile. And so they would do a training on DISC, and then separately, some people would be trained on AQ, and there was a big difference. If someone is trained on just DISC, they have some understanding of it, but they don't have the skills to navigate conversations and really influence. So we give them a hypothetical scenario. Imagine you're going out to lunch with someone, they really are interested in your DISC style, and they ask you basic questions. What is it like to work with, your DISC style? Why would someone work with your DISC style? How do they work with your DISC style? And know what happened? People fumbled around, and we recorded this and encoded it. They fumbled around. They didn't answer concisely. They had no awareness of the answer types, and entire categories of answers were missed in our study. Nobody to answer the what question, what's it like to work with your DISC profile? Nobody provided a metaphor. Nobody provided a story, things that we think we just do naturally. But the problem was people weren't skilled communicators. They sort of took in the information, but they couldn't convey in a way that really made an influential difference. And for all the reasons we've talked about, if you're going to lunch with someone, you can convey that metaphor, convey that story. We know that's going to make a difference. But now you want to do so for all the answers on command to the appropriate questions. You're going to be much better as a communicator.
Take me back before you founded AQ. Were you a professor and then you kind of became intrigued with, I guess, becoming a more effective communicator, and then you delved into AQ? Did you ever work with corporations before founding AQ? I guess, what did life look like then, the in-between phase?
Yeah. I'd say I had life before my PhD program, and you know, frankly, involved in junior positions at different companies. Then I went to academia, and when I started to really explore this AQ research, sort of presented to some companies before it was even published, and got a really strong response. Also did a TEDx at Georgia Tech on it. If no one's interested, they could watch that, and really got a sense that there's something here that this maybe could be utilized more broadly. So it was a gradual process where I transitioned out of academia, doing this full time. Say the first phase was seeing if there was interest in this. And so that's where we ramped up the number of partners around the world, and there was interest. And then the next phase sort of extended was with AI. I think as AI came on the forefront, really took a look at our business and said, what is the relationship between AI and AQ? At first, they had a natural reaction when I first heard about AI is, well, you don't need AQ. You can use AI. It's a large language model. It navigates questions and answers. But the more we looked at it, AQ is something that coexists with AI. It's a natural language human framework of how we navigate conversations. And you can use that to interface with AI as well as to others. And so we've been building out this platform, and now we're really poised for some, I think, some significant growth. So it gives you a little bit of a window into my past and the trajectory I'm on.
No, thank you. Yeah, for those who are not watching, I've been smiling ear to ear every single time Brian answers a question, because this is truly, I can see it being game changing for my organization and organizations around the globe. To obviously increase sales, increase work efficiency, become a better leader, etc. Now, Brian, for those listening who are possibly in the leadership space, they are leadership coaches, but they kind of lack business acumen. And no offense to anyone listening, but is the harsh truth. You have made partnerships around the globe, which is something to be proud of. If it's proprietary, just let us know. But how did you manage to make global partnerships like that? It kind of sounds like Amazon, where they have partnerships around the globe and they are obviously
Yeah.
crushing the game right now.
I did something really simple. I just had different geographies. I just sent out some LinkedIn messages and said, "Here's what we have." Sent them. His book is coming out. It sent them. Had a website I put together, and I'm looking to work with people. And would you be interested in me sharing some more? And then I'd share some more and meet with people and just being genuine. But also, as I engaged, I'd use AQ. So, for example, to illustrate, and when I got on that first call with people, a lot of times they'd say, I never respond to calls and, this is interesting and decided to jump on, but they're pretty apprehensive about meeting with someone they didn't know. And they'd either explicitly or implicitly ask about, this partnership. They're thinking, what is this partnership? Is this just some kind of, baloney that you say and, everybody says it? They were skeptical. But I would use AQ and I would provide a concept answer. So one of the things with a concept answer is you can break it down into smaller pieces. So I would say, to me, a partnership is giving of time, talent, and energy. And I could explain it further. But really, that concept answer melted people. People would say, there's credibility here, coupled with other answers, and we move very quickly, and then people would be interested in what I was talking about. So I was using AQ to influence them. If they asked what a partnership was, or if I was just bumbling around, I'm a partnership. I just, I really like to work with people or something like that. That's not going to convince. I like to believe I was able to grow the partner base pretty quickly because I was using AQ as part of the outreach. But that's what I did. And I'll give you one tip though. You mentioned, for those that are listening, that don't have a strong business background, or maybe on the sales side. One of the first things our partners typically do when they get certified, and you could do this on your own, is, again, going back to the three basic questions. Someone asks you as a coach, what value do you provide? Why do people work with you? How do they work with you? Develop your 6 answers for that. These are your exemplary answers, and they're the corollary to the elevator pitch, except these are elevator answers. Imagine you go up the elevator, you don't know what question they're going to ask, you deliver that answer. So if all you have is a pitch, maybe you just have story, that's only one answer. You want all the answers and have the command. So if you can develop your own 6 answers to high level questions, you're going to be so much better off as a coach or trainer trying to explain your services.
What is your primary goal for 2026 this year? Is it to work with more corporations? Is it to train more facilitators?
Yeah, another good question. And by the way, someone in Europe, they'd often say, you Americans often say, good question. I don't, in my, that's an American thing, but I like to say that it's a good question. But my primary goal is to be, in a sense, smaller. I want to work with partners within my own inner circle, as well as developing some more that really get AQ and want to help me to grow it to the next level. So I'm looking for people that it's very basic. They get it, they're committed to growing it, and they want to engage me in terms of partnership, giving of time, talent, and energy. A meeting with me once a week and or more. What can we do to turn this into something that, frankly, most people have never heard of, to something that's transformational that everyone's heard of? And I think you can only do that if you have a very small group of people that are very smart that want to work with you. So I think that's where I want to go, is not grow my partnership base, but sort of focus on those that are most interested in bringing us forward to the world.
Just for my own curiosity's sake, could you describe like the most perfect partner who would want to work with you or who you would love to work with?
Yes, I think, well, there's two. I mean, if you're a coach, consultant, trainer, someone that has um, strong capabilities, strong intellectual property, they have a view on the world. There's someone that cares about their craft, similar to how these top golf instructors cared about their craft. I want to work with the best. I want to work with those people that are committed to being the best and that are open to integrating, their intellectual property with 6 basic answers and questions. So I think those are the individuals I want that are the best at what they're doing and they're open. Third, In a practical sense, I am interested in variety of partners I work with. So I, have, some focusing in the sales space or leadership space. If there's something you're bringing new or some kind of particular focus, that's particularly interesting. So one of my partners, for example, is focused on only banks. So we're just doing all kind of stuff that are focusing on banks, and that's kind of interesting, right? So those are some things I'm looking for in coaches, consultants, and trainers. And enterprises, I'll just say it's sort of similar. You're someone that realizes you want to have elevated conversations, you have important topics, and you're serious about change and improvement. Well, then I want to work with your organization. And so that's the profile of that group.
Thank you for the context there. Dr. Bryant, what leadership challenges or even communication challenges do you see becoming more common over the next 1 to 2 years?
Well, I think I sort of lean into AI. I think, and we could have a whole podcast just talking about AI, but what is the view of AI? Does AI do stuff that replaces you? Is AI substitute for you? Is it a thinking partner? I think what's going to be important is those that are going to excel and those that are excelling are those that are going to use AI in a collaborative way, not to think for you. I like to say, a metaphor for AI is that innovation is at the periphery. AI can do all kind of stuff. What can you do on top of it? How can you add value to it? So I think there's going to be ever more important need for people to have command of communication, to have command of questions and answers, and to navigate the world intentionally, whether it's interacting with AI or other humans in a way where you're trying to add value and transform. Case in point of the opposite of what we want to see, I've heard some stories about job applicants. And the sentiment is, wow, it was clear they were typing in the question into AI during the job interview to get some kind of answer back. That's not a thinking partner. That's a parrot. And you don't want to do that. So I think the challenge as we go forward is how to leverage AI in a way that thinking partners, so that kind of approach. And I think in order to do that, you have to intentionally navigate questions and answers. That's where a framework like AQ comes in place. You can start to understand the questions and answers being asked and how you want to move the conversation.
You actually know a lot about business. And on a personal note, where did you acquire this business acumen? Did you learn that studying at the University of Illinois or Illinois? Did
Yeah.
you learn that with working with your partners at AQ? Or where did this business acumen come from?
Well, I mean, I have done a lot of coaching and consulting with companies. So it's interfacing with companies. I I am a business professor, so I think about these topics at the intersection of business, but they tend to be the soft side of business. So we're talking about leadership negotiations and things like that. So I have a fairly good grasp of those kind of topics.
Yeah, because 'cause you're mentioning top of funnel, bottom of funnel,
Oh
like,
yeah,
just
yeah,
certain, business vocabulary. I'm like, how did Mr. Bryan know all this stuff, man? Like, those are vocab words that I use all the time, you know?
yeah. Well, I think as an entrepreneur, I mean, sales and marketing is something you have to sort of think about. Sales is so important, and so topics of funnels. And then a lot of our partners are in sales, so, AQ partners. So these are the conversations they're having, with their clients and prospects. In terms of sales, I think the biggest thing from a sales standpoint is, as most sales methodologies are based in questions. And so the answer side just really opens something up for people. And I think, frankly, it's kind of liberating because as humans, I think you want to provide answers, don't you? Don't you want to make it? You want to influence the world around you. You don't want someone to say, just ask all the questions, ask all the questions. Yes, I think asking questions is very, very important, but you should feel emboldened to provide answers. And I'll give you just a anecdotal story. There actually are some evidence points here, going back to our earlier conversation with sales. So he was do some work with a pharmaceutical company. They had a couple hundred sales reps, did a keynote and some workshops. They took a test we have. It's Explore AQ. You can get your AQ score, and it basically identifies mapping of questions to answers, and do you get it right, so to speak. I think it was the top three sales reps in the company got 100%, and it's very rare. So the people that were the best did the best at it, and then Also, within the context, I interviewed one of the top sales performers, and he shared with me sort of a simple answer example about the power of answers. We're so trained on questions. Again, questions are wonderful. You have to ask great questions. I'm not saying that. He had, this is a senior sales pharmaceutical person that had 5 minutes on an executive buyer's calendar. He went into the meeting and the meeting was extended to an hour. And it was extended to an hour, not because of the questions, but because of the quality of the answers he could provide. He could answer the other person's, the buyer's questions. He had stories, procedures, things related to drug development. That opens up time and space. Nobody wants to sit there and ask me a million questions, and I'm going to be interested in that. That only works when the other party, when there's balance in the conversation. Even if it's unbalanced, if you provide the answers the other party wants, the door opens. So this is, and the last thing I'll say to punctuate this, even anecdotally, we think about this. The old adage, what if you can answer the question that keeps the buyer up at night, you're going to win the deal. It's answering the question. It's not asking them the question that keeps you up at night. So I think there's a paradigm shift we need to have. And some of this may be a good way to as we reach the end of the call, this to think about, really give a reset, rethink about the importance of questions and answers in your professional world, whether it's sales or leadership, and hopefully be open to the idea that questions and answers are both important, and you need balance. You need to be effective at both to do well in the world.
No, I completely agree. You said we have to have a paradigm shift around this, and it's so interesting. Are you familiar with the name Jeremy Miner?
No.
He runs he runs a corporation called Seventh Level, and his framework or methods are called NEPQ, which stands for Neuro Emotional Persuasion Questions. And at first, being kind of green in sales, I like this framework. This makes sense to me. But now that I'm a little bit more experienced, you don't want to ask emotionally charged questions to executive decision makers at the very top. You're going to get laughed out of that room quickly. But what you said, if you can answer their questions, you can extend your meeting by 55 minutes, which could lead to a massive sale.
Yes.
Thank you. Just thank you. Continue.
And just to punctuate that, you want to be a natural conversationalist, balance, question and answers going around and around. That's the goal. And if I am going to an executive and I'm giving them the answer, the procedure that's going to lock the keys to the kingdom for them, what is that going to do? That's going to stimulate additional questions, right? That's going to stimulate different answers. The conversation has momentum. It's more difficult to ask those questions that will create that momentum with someone. It's very possible, but all else being equal, if you have 10 seconds with someone, if you have the answer that's perfect for that conversation, it's better than the perfect question in many respects. But I'm maybe being a little bit confrontational at that point, and maybe I'll walk it back. But you get the idea.
Hey, being confrontational is a great marketing tactic, my friend. Brian, we are wrapping up on time. I truly do wish that we had more time. There's so many things I want to uncover. But what are some key notes that you want to end with the people? What are some takeaways that you want to?
Here's a couple simple takeaways. First, be open to the idea that questions and answers are both important. Second, we've introduced 6 answer types that map to questions. Begin to think about those questions in your world. Third, take specific questions that are important to you, broad questions. Why am I a leader? How do I lead? What is leadership? And start to develop your own answers, develop your own muscles. And those are 3 things you can do right away that'll make a difference, tomorrow and the day after. So start there.
And I think you said this earlier, but where can they find you, my friend?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Brian Glibkowski. You can also find me at raiseyouraq.com. And I look forward to speaking with anyone that's interested in learning more.
Brian, it was a pleasure having you. Audience, thanks for tuning in. Until next time.